What's up, YouTube family? Tio here, Simplistic Fishing, back at you tonight with some more beginner fishing videos. This is Bass Fishing 101, episode 4. Tonight we're talking shaky heads, all about the shaky heads, how to use them, techniques, all of that good stuff. This is a great video. I learned a lot taping this video tonight. I learned a lot about these shaky heads and how they perform under the water, and I believe I might actually be changing my lures after this video tonight. Stick around, I got some good stuff for you. All right, we're going to start off talking about how to rig up the Divine Shaky Head worm. Now, this is going to pretty much be any kind of worm that you want, but I'm just picking this one because, as I talked about earlier, this is one of my favorites. So this is the June bug color. Definitely a very good worm. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pair that up with this 1/4 ounce shaky head. You can see here it's got the bait keeper here. Some of the times you'll get them without the bait keepers. It's up to you what you like. I actually prefer the ones with the bait keepers. Seems to work better for me. Doesn't affect my my hookup ratio or anything like that. So I'm going to take this, and I'm actually going to pair, or told you I was going to pair that up with this, but I'm going to take the end of this right here where that little hook is. You can see right here, let me get my hand out of the way. Right there, right where the end of the tip is. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to put it right in the center of the worm right here. I'll take that, stick it right in the center. And then I'm going to press down a little bit, and I'm going to turn it clockwise. All right, so I'm turning it clockwise. And I'm going to turn it all the way down until I get down till it's totally buried, right? So it's going to be totally buried. It's going to look something like that. So now that we've got that set up that way, now what we're going to do is we're going to hold our worm down here like this, let it dangle a little bit, figure out where that hook comes in, and then we're going to poke it out. So we're going to go there, put my finger just like we talked about on the Texas rig. We're going to poke it out. So just like that. Now that is not totally weedless yet because see, I've still got the hook point that's out there. Now some people say just leave the hook out there a little bit, you'll have better hookup ratios. They're probably right because that plastic's not getting your way. But anytime I fish the shaky head, I'm fishing around rocks, cover, all that stuff, you know, thick wood, all kinds of crazy stuff. So I always want to go weedless. So I'm going to take this worm right here. You'll see it right here. See where the hook point is. And I'm just going to move a couple ribs up, stretch it out just a hair, and then just pinch it right in there. So now you can see if I run my finger over this, nothing at all. It's totally weedless. So we'll take this out, let's throw that in the pool, and we'll see what kind of action we get. Next up, I want to talk to you guys about rigging up this trick worm. It's going to be exactly the same way we talked about with the Divine Shaky Head worm. This is the one we did earlier. Same exact way, but I just want to show you because it looks a little bit different. Notice how the Divine Shaky Head worm, it doesn't have a flat side, right? And a lot of these worms will have a flat side. And of course, you can rig them up Texas rig, and you can put the, you know, like we did earlier on the beginner video where we just had a Texas rig with a weight. We could do that with these worms as well and just have that flat side be the bottom. But these worms are awesome. These trick worms are awesome on shaky heads. So let's go ahead and grab one out of here. You can see here, it's got the flat bottom on it and then the rib top. This is an awesome worm, by the way, pure black. All right, so then on this one, you kind of have a couple different options here. You can go with an 1/8 ounce shaky head and throw that on the spinning rod, or you could go with a 1/4 ounce like we did with the Divine Shaky Head worm as well. Of course, that one you could throw on an 1/8 ounce too, but for this one, let's rig this up on the 1/8 ounce one. Let's get a little bit lighter. Let's say the fish are being a little bit more finickier and a little bit tougher to catch. So very similar to the other one. You can see here on the bottom of this hook, this one's got a little bit different keeper on it. It's got a straight tip coming right out the middle of it. So all we have to do on that one, that's even easier, is we're just going to take that center point of that worm, which is right there, and we're going to stick it right on to where that sharp point is right here. All right, so I'm going to stick it on there, dead center. And then again, just like we talked about earlier, we're going to rotate it clockwise. And we're going to make sure it's center. That's key. If it's off, just restart it. Don't worry about having to redo it. You're going to have to redo these things a lot till you get used to them. So then what we're going to do here is you can see with my hands, I'm really trying to rig this up to where I get it dead center with that hook right here where that hook eye is. So I got to move it over just a hair. And then now, just like we talked about earlier, we're going to go down here and see where that hook comes through. And then we're going to poke it through, just like we did earlier. And then that right there is how we talked about earlier. The hook's exposed, so that would be exposing it like that. That's good hookup ratio. That's also a good way to get hung up in a lot of crap and lose your shaky head. Or you can take that same exact setup that you just had, and again, watch the ribs of this bait. I'm going to pull it forward, and then I'm going to skin hook it. All right, now I've got me a Texas rig where I don't get hooked with my finger. But man, if a bass bites that, that's off that thing, you're going to get hooked. This is an awesome, awesome bait. We'll talk about that one here in a minute when we get out to the pool. All right, next we're going to talk about, see a little color pattern I got here, June bug. This is the Super Salt Plus Finesse Worm by Zoom. This is very similar to that trick worm that we just had. This was the trick worm. Notice how it's a lot bigger, and this one's a lot smaller. See the difference? I think it's like a, what, I don't even know. I'm not even gonna guess. 5 and 6 inches maybe, something like that, I don't know. But anyways, this one is a lot bigger. So that your trick worm's a lot bigger. This is a finesse worm, so it's a lot smaller. Now you can throw this on drop shots and stuff like that, but for this video, we're talking shaky heads. And so since this is so small, you can throw it on this 1/4 ounce shaky head, but this is almost too big for that. So we're gonna downsize on this one. For this smaller profile, we're gonna go with the 1/8 ounce. Same thing like we did earlier. We're just going to find that hook point where that bait keeper is, which is right here. We're going to find the middle point of that worm, which is right here. We're going to stick it on there. Press down, go clockwise. And then here you'll see I've been turning it and I'm not lined up, right? And I told you guys earlier, it's really important we get it lined up. So let's twist it just a little bit more and make sure that that thing is dead center. And that looks pretty good. So now that I've got it centered up, again, I'm gonna let it dangle. And this one, you'll notice it's actually lining up perfectly. You can see where the ribs stop there, right where the hook point should come in. That one's gonna be an easy one to rig up. So we're gonna go there to that spot. Press it through, and then again we've got the same setup that we had on the bigger ones. This is just a smaller profile. Really good looking worm here. So then we're just going to take that, and again we're going to pull forward just a few ribs, skin hook it, push it back down. Now you got a Texas rig. Now one thing you'll notice on this one, see how we have a really big bend right here? It's, as the other one, we didn't have that big of a bend. We got a little bit of a bend there, but not as big. This one we had a little bit of bend, but really not hardly any at all. That one's pretty straight. So you're okay. Even if you have that bend, you're fine. You don't have to worry about it, but that's bugging you and you're like, man, everybody says it has to be straight. What you can do is you can hold your fingers right here on the tip of the shaky head, right there on the eyelid, and press down with your thumb right here and pull back up here at the same time. That's gonna bend your hook back a little bit. Now I'm gonna go and rig that back in there. And what I'm doing, if you'll notice, that bend's not as, or that bow is not as bad. And I can bend it forward, I can bend it back. You can also bend it around with this bait keeper to get the bait keeper set up to where you get a straighter profile as well. So lots of different things you can do there to mess around to make sure your worm's straight. Honestly, guys, I don't think it really matters, but this is the Finesse Zoom worm. So let's jump over and let's talk about some other baits. Next up is my all-time favorite. You guys have heard me talk about this time and time and time again, the baby brush hog. This is the black and blue, but color doesn't really matter here. We're just talking about shaky heads and how to use them. But obviously you're seeing a little bit of a trend here when we're talking about shaky heads. We've got a lot of dark colors. Now, that's probably because I live here in Texas and most of my water is pretty chocolatey, so I have to stick with the dark colors. I just have more confidence with them. But anyways, let's move over. Let's talk about this baby brush hog. So this thing's awesome. Good looking bait and a fish killing machine. Now you can rig this up on an 1/8 ounce shaky head, but I prefer to put this one on the 1/4 ounce. And one of the main reasons why is because you'll see when we go out to the pool and we're actually using this bait, I'm showing you how to use it. When we do that whole flipping, or I don't even know what you could call it, flip, or we're going to twitch our bait up and down. When we twitch it really hard, that's why I want the 1/4 ounce. It's going to allow me to pop it up a little bit higher and then let it fall pretty fast. And so I like the 1/4 ounce when I'm using creature baits, especially something like the brush hog. So I'm just going to take the same thing with the brush hog. It's just like the worm. We're going to find the end of the little bait keeper there, which is right there. We're going to find the center of the brush hog. Now the key on the brush hogs is to make sure you don't rig it upside down. So on this one, if we look at it, you want to make sure that you've got the right side up. So the way that you can tell is because the little hands right here on the bait, if they point down, then that's actually the top of the bait. So this bait's actually colored a little bit differently. The black side is actually the top side and the blue side is actually the bottom side. See how these fins face down? So just remember that when you're rigging it up. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to go right through the middle. We're going to press and then we're going to turn clockwise and we're going to push it all the way down there. And then remember the black side was our top side, which is a little bit confusing. A lot of times that blue side will be the top. So right there, we're going to let it dangle. We're going to figure out where that hook goes, just like we did with the worm. We're going to press it through. Actually, I didn't get that right. Let me get it just perfect. Press that through right there. And right there, we've got ourselves a good looking little brush hog. All rigged up nice and fancy. That one's actually not as good as I would like it to be, but let's see if I can fix it really quick for you guys. These things always rig up a little bit differently. There we go. Now we got a nice little Texas rig. Brush hog, shaky head. Looks beautiful. Same thing like we did before. If we want to hide it, we just go in and just hide the hook there a little bit so it doesn't bother you. And there you go. You've got your nice shaky head. We'll talk about this one in the pool. This is my favorite all-time lure. I would not leave home without this lure for sure. All right, last worm, last bait we're going to talk about as far as how to rig it up. And we talk about shaky heads. We talked already about the brush hog we had here with the 1/4 ounce shaky head. We talked about the 1/8 ounce shaky head and throwing the little baby finesse worms on it. We also had the 1/4 ounce with the divine shaky head and then the old trick worm as well. So we've pretty much just been talking a lot about 1/4 ounce and 1/8 ounce. Really, that's kind of your go-to weight pretty much 95% of the time, especially if you're fishing shallower, say 15 feet or less. In fact, you could almost throw a 1/4 ounce in 20 foot, but let's say 15 feet or less, you're going to go with these smaller shaky heads. Now in the summertime, you're going to have to go out a little bit deeper. And once you get really past about 15, 20 foot, these things become impossible. The 1/8 ounce ones are gone after about 10 foot, and these are gone after about 20 foot. So now you're left with nothing. Well, that's where these huge shaky heads come in. And this is I think this is a 1/4 ounce, or a 1/2 ounce or a 3/4 ounce shaky head. This is a divine shaky head, or not divine shaky head, the 6 cents shaky head. Actually, they sent me in a monthly pack, but these things are awesome. But you don't have to get 6 cents. You can get whatever brand that you want. But the reason why I say 6 cents is because 6 cents and Smash Tech Custom Baits, these guys right here, I think they know each other or something like that. But Smash Tech, before 6 cents got super big, Smash Tech had made these worms specifically for this hook. And so it just pairs up really, really well. And I can tell you from experience out on Lake Fork, this is a money lure to use on Fork in the summertime. I've caught some giants on this little setup right here. So it's just a big old 8.25 crawler. It's called a Magnum crawler. It's just a big old shaky head worm. So you need the bigger hook, obviously, for this. We're going to just do the same thing. We're going to go through the center, look for that little sharp point. We're going to screw this one down. Get it nice and close there. And then on this one, if you'll notice, my bait keeper's a little bit off. So I'm gonna press it back a little bit, get it nice and lined up straight. so that way I don't have any problems once I put this worm on there getting it lined up. So again, I'm going to put it on there just like we talked about earlier. My hook is a little bit exposed right now, so I'm just going to pull it back just a little bit, put it on there, and then right there we've got a beautiful looking shaky head. This thing's totally weedless. You can chuck it a mile. It catches giants, it catches timmies too, catches them all. Really good bait to use, especially if you're out fishing deep, fishing off ledges, fishing in heavy cover, stuff like that, fishing in some deeper water, or maybe just fishing for a lot bigger fish. This would be a great lure to use. Now this one, I use a little bit different from fishing standpoint. My technique with it is a little bit different than the other ones, but we'll talk about that once we get out in the pool. But again, big shaky head, and then all these little guys. These are all going to be just absolute money baits to use pretty much all seasons of the year. But let's go out to the pool. Let's talk about using these things. All right, before we jump over here into the pool and do the testing with the lures and I show you guys what these look like under the water, I want to talk to you about the rod and reel setup. So anytime I'm using the 1/8 ounce, these are the little small shaky heads we talked about, right? The small 1/8 ounce. 1/8 ounce or lower, I'm switching over to my spinning rod. Okay, my spinning rod I believe is a 6'9", no, it's a 7-foot medium action, light fast action. So it's a Dobbins rod. I really like this, but it doesn't matter what rod you get. Just get something about 7 foot and get medium action. You should be in good shape for the 1/8 ounce. Now the 1/4 ounce, I switch those over and I obviously go over to a bigger rod, and you'll be happy because we're continuing on this beginner lesson. It's a 7.3. medium heavy fast. You guys heard me talk about that before in the other episode. I believe it was even episode 3 we talked about it. But that is going to be the rod that you're going to want to use for the 1/4 ounce shaky heads. This is my 7.3 medium heavy fast. It's my victory rod. You can get those over at Bass Pro. Good rods. You know, it doesn't really matter your gear ratios and all that. You guys have already heard me talk about it. This is my my speed, or not my custom light. And what I do is basically just set that up with the 1/4 ounce. This is my brush hog. And that is probably my all-time favorite setup. 7.3 medium heavy with this brush hog, with that shaky head. I just can't go wrong. That's definitely my favorite setup of all times. Now, also on this 7.3 medium heavy, we'll also use that for that divine worm that we talked about. This one I just pushed down with my finger. Sorry about that. Have the divine worm and also that zoom trick worm. Those are all going to be on the 1/4 ounce, and all of those you can throw on the 7.3 medium heavy fast action rod. Now, last but not least is the big mama. We got to talk about that one before we wrap this up and go over here and test these out. And that is going to be a 7.4 heavy action fast. So this is a lot heavier than that 7.3, right? But this is also a 1/2 ounce to a 3/4 ounce lure. You're going to need that little bit heavier setup. So definitely if you get into these bigger shaky heads, get a little bit bigger rod. You could probably throw that on a 7.3 medium heavy fast, but it's going to be it's going to feel a little heavy. So if you don't want to have that heavier feel, definitely go up to the 7.4, and that is going to take care of you. Let's jump over in the pool. Let's test these things out. All right, let's start off talking about this smaller trick worm, right? We talked about our smaller finesse worm by Zoom. We talked about that earlier when we rigged it up. I want to show you guys first off what this looks like when we're out in the pool or in the hot tub here on the action that we get on this worm. So come on over here and I'll show you how this worm works. All right, let's drop it in here. Let's just see what this thing looks like. So that's it setting on the bottom. Shaky heads are supposed to set up and down. So let's see if that's really true. That worm is not standing up and down. Now if I pop it, it stands up for a little bit, but not really doing too much. All right, so that is your shaky head. So they say that, you know, a lot of times you can say here the shaky head and just shake it like that and shaking the worm. But I'm telling you right here, as far as in this little example, I can't get that thing to shake. Let's go in a little bit deeper water here. Let's see if that thing stands up any better. This is in 4 foot of water. It stood up for a second, didn't it? Now it's standing up there because I've got line on it. But yeah, I cannot get that thing to stand up. Very interesting. All right, so that is the little shaky head. Now as far as working this bait, pretty much all I'm gonna do if I'm throwing something this small is I'm just gonna cast it out there. I'm gonna let it go all the way down the bottom. Let me adjust the camera here a little bit for you. Let it go all the way to the bottom, and then I'm gonna get my line to where It's just a little tight, but you can see, I don't know if you can see it because it's starting to get dark here, but I got a little bit, just a little bit of slack in my line, but just enough to where if I move my line right here, I'm moving the worm. And I'm just gonna shake it with my hand right here. You can see my wrist where I just shake it a little bit. Just gonna shake it, and as I shake it, I'm just dragging it along just very slowly. And that's pretty much how I'm gonna throw that finesse worm. Now the other way that I might do it would be to get a little bit of slack in there and then pop it a couple times. You'll notice when I pop it, that worm gets some pretty good action there. So that might be the only way, other way that I would do it. But typically, if you see me with a finesse rod in my hand, I am typically just gonna throw it out and dead stick it out there and see if I can find one that way. Let's switch over. Let's talk about another bait. All right, our next test is gonna be the Divine Shaky Head worm. Let's see if this one has a little bit better action than that little trick worm did. I'm gonna drop it down here in the hot tub where we can see it a little bit better. And, oh, stood up for a little bit. It is standing up. So this one's standing up a lot better than that finesse worm. That still falls. Now it's standing straight up. Now, if that was happening, that would be awesome. If you can get it to land like that every time. The problem is, it doesn't land like that every time. It's about a, what, 25% chance. There we go, it's standing up again. So this is going to be a great dead sticking bait because you can see that. Now let's take it over here and let's show you how I would throw this one. Now 1/4 ounce, I'm going to step up and I'm going to throw that on a bait casting reel, right? So put that on a bait casting reel. I'm just going to flip it out there, and then as I flip it out there, I'm going to, again, same thing we did with that spinning reel. We're going to let it fall all the way down the bottom, make sure we got slack line, and then we're going to reel up just a little bit. We have just a little bit of slack, and the same thing, we're just going to shake it around a little bit, and every once in a while you might pop it a couple times. But other than that, you want to work this extremely slow. I'm actually working it too fast because I'm sitting here trying to show you guys how to use it, but I would actually throw it slower than this if I was fishing. Now the thing that's cool about this is I can actually see if that worm's standing up. So on some of these hops, I'm getting it to stand up, and then other hops I'm not. That time I got it to stand up. So some interesting stuff there, but that is how I would throw the Divine Shaky Head. Let's go on, let's move on, let's talk about some more baits. It's time to talk about the Mondo worm, the big old fat daddy, right? That is the Smash Tech custom baits, the one we talked about, the mag crawler. Let's see what this thing looks like in the hot tub. Let's drop it in here and see if it has a little better action. Well, obviously it sinks super fast. Oh, and it's standing straight up. Beautiful, beautiful. I don't know if you guys can see that. Stands straight up. Pop it a couple times. Every time this thing is falling, it's standing absolutely straight up. So guys, after doing this video, I almost want to come out here with my shaky heads and test them and see which ones pop, I can pop like that fall and hold that worm up. And that's the kind I need to be buying. If the worm can't hold itself up, I don't need to be using that, because that's kind of defeats the whole purpose of the shaky head. The purpose is to get that worm to stand straight up like that, and then to be able to just kind of barely shake your line. If you see what I just did there, if I barely shake my line, that tail moves a little bit, and that is really what was supposed to be the purpose of the shaky head. But you can see a really good bait. Now let's talk about what we do here on this one. This one's a little bit different. I might pop it, but really for the most part, if I'm throwing the heavier lures like this, I'm really just going to throw it out there. I'm going to let it fall down to the bottom. Then I'm going to do something totally different. I'm actually going to come over here. I'm going to tighten it up just a little bit, and then I'm going to drag it. And then I'm going to let it set. And then before I drag it again, I'm going to reel in that slack line, and I'm going to drag it again. And then I'm going to reel in the slack line as I go back to it. I'm going to drag it again. I'm obviously going to go a lot slower. Now here what I'm noticing is my worm is standing up, so never mind. I didn't think the worm was standing up when I was dragging this, but it is. Actually, it's not. Oh, there it goes. So it is standing up. Looks beautiful in the water. I know you guys can't see it. I'll try over here if you guys can see it. Maybe I can bring it in a little bit and you can see it if I get closer here. This worm looks great. I mean, this is an awesome looking worm. It's the best one we've seen so far. So definitely a good bait. That is how I would throw that big old Smash Tech worm. You know what, guys? After doing this video, we're gonna do some more testing, and we're gonna figure out which shaky heads work with which worms, And you and I are gonna catch a lot more fish. Let's switch over, let's talk about the last one. That's that baby brush hog. Last but not least, it's my all-time favorite, the baby brush hog. Now I didn't have a little bit of a line on there left just because I didn't cut my tie off, but don't worry about that. It's just for the video. But let's drop this thing into the hot tub and let's see what it looks like on the shaky head. So put it down here, drop it in there. Looks pretty good. That one's standing up a little bit actually. The tails are definitely standing up. And usually when I'm working this bait, I'm gonna pop it a lot. I'm not gonna drag it too much. I'm usually gonna pop it, just like we talked about with the Texas rig. But you can see here, this bait's actually setting up a little bit. A lot better than that worm did for sure. So I really like that. Guys, this is my favorite all-time bait. If you're not using the baby brush hog, you're missing out. I'm telling you, you're gonna get a ton of bites with this thing. So let's talk about how I would throw this thing. Now, we're gonna come over here just like we did with the rest of the baits. I'm just gonna flip it out there. I'm gonna let it go down to the bottom. My rod tip, like we talked about earlier, I'm kind of following it down and I'm really paying attention to my line. If that line gets really tight at all as it's going down the bottom, you got to reel in and set the hook. Okay, unfortunately I don't have any fish in my pool, so can't show you how to set the hook. But as it gets down there, again, if you were able to see my line right here, it's a little bit taut, so it's not super tight, it's just a little bit. So all I'm gonna do once it gets down there is I'm gonna pop it a couple times, and then I'm gonna let it fall. And then I'm gonna reel it in again. I'm gonna get just a little bit of slack line and I'm gonna pop it again. And then I'm gonna just do that the whole time coming back. And just pause every once in a while when it falls. And you'll see, I don't know if you can see it in the water, this thing's got great action when it falls. And when I'm popping it, I'm in 3 to 4 foot of water right here. I'm almost popping it all the way up to the very surface of the water. So when you're popping that bait around and you think that you're not getting it very far off the water, that thing, or getting very far off the bottom, that thing is really coming up. That pop right there, that's on slack line too, is coming up at least 3 foot every time I pop it. Great looking bait. This is the money all-time bait for me for North Texas. If I get in a struggle or if I'm having a bad day, I can't find a bite, I'm going to the baby brush hog all the time. Hey guys, that wraps us up for tonight. I hope you've learned a lot about the shaky head and the different ways to use it. Until next time, I hope you catch your PB.